What I wanted to say is, after we're done with questions, we have some resources that we've put in the app for you. Hopefully they'll be useful for you. And I also wanted to say the importance of cybersecurity. It is not sexy. It's usually not very fun. But at LSC, I take it as one of my major duties, because if I can lower the risk and if I can keep us in business, I can allow the other people at the Legal Services Corporation to do their job and to fulfill our mission. And that's why it's important. So we need to all be, super serious about this and do as much as we can to lower the risk. And the first panelist, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Eshelman.
Great. Well, thank you. It's really great to be here. My name is Matthew Eshelman, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. Community IT, we're a managed services provider that focuses on IT support for nonprofits, and so we support about 200 organizations and about 8,000 users across the US. It's great to be back here at ITC for the 25th year. The last time actually I was at ITC, I think it was called TIG, and it was 2014. So that was quite a while ago, much smaller. I think I looked back at my notes, and in that session I talked about voice over IP and virtualization. So, we've moved on at least from virtualization. We don't think about that so much. And so it's great to be here to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and the cybersecurity roadmap, and just some of the different things to consider when putting together a plan. So one of the resources that is available, will be on the slide, is the cybersecurity playbook that we've put together at Community IT. It's a little bit different than some of the kind of industry standards like the NIST and the other big acronyms, and that it really comes from our experience in supporting small to mid-sized organizations, so that kind of like 15 to 100 person organization, where the big cybersecurity frameworks can feel really overwhelming. And so what we've put together is a playbook that kind of walks organizations through if you're kind of just looking at foundational controls just to get started, or maybe you've got all the bases covered and then you can move up to more kind of more proactive controls, or if you've done all those things, then you can kind of get to the top and kind of finish up there. And the foundational controls that we really want to talk to, and as you leave today, being able to say, yes, I've done all those things, I think that's the goal. And we revised the playbook for this year after kind of leaving it sit for a couple years. And it is interesting to see that the things that have changed that we would consider baseline 3 or 4 years ago, the bar really has been raised, and I think continues to be raised as we look at protecting our organization. So the things that I would say that would be foundational from a cybersecurity perspective are policies. So it sounds boring, but policy is really the place to get started, because it helps give people a common understanding of what we're doing and why, and we can agree on what we're doing. The new recommendation that we're really enforcing or advocating for this year, based on the research that we've seen, is around MFA, and not just MFA like a second factor, but MFA being a strong method. So think security key, think Touch ID, think Windows Hello, right? Something that ties your authentication to your device and not just a second factor, which unfortunately we've seen exploited in some of the account compromises that we've responded to. And then the other pieces are around email. So, and we'll talk about that and talk about it much more in our session that I'll be doing with my colleague Anna this afternoon on security awareness training. But the vast majority of attacks that are targeting you all, small and mid-sized organizations, are coming through email. So whatever you can do to reduce the threats that are getting to your inbox, email filtering solutions, and then security awareness training, that really empowers your users to kind of know and understand what they're seeing when it comes into their inbox, and help to reduce the risk to the organization overall. So it's really great to be here back at ITC, and especially here with so many other really talented folks that are interested in cybersecurity for legal services organizations.
All right, Bill, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Wow, that was lukewarm. All right.
Do it again.
Yes, good morning, everyone. comes down to 30 seconds left. No, just kidding. So cyber is a misused, much maligned term. I don't usually use that in my profession. In fact, I put it on our denied words list. Cyber is not something that I chose as a profession. I was talking with Ellie earlier. It chose me. After my 3 decades in the Marine Corps, I wrote a book, 21st Century Chinese Cyber Warfare, about how China uses computers as a weapon system. The purpose was to educate, much like this session. And if you're thinking of a cybersecurity roadmap, think about what your threat surface is and who would want to attack you. And if you've already been ransomed, then you have a good idea of where to build that taxonomy of threat actors, if you will. And if you have not done a test of your systems, your infrastructure, meaning all of your domain services, as well as the web-enabled technologies, have one of your service providers test that for you. And then ask them to provide a risk table of those vulnerabilities that they've found, score them. I know Matt kind of dismissed the acronym SOUP, and I hate it myself, but there is a common vulnerability scoring system out there that the federal government uses to score vulnerabilities that are announced by Samsung, medical devices, other types of operational and informational technology out there in the ICS space. Have your provider rank those and risk those based on the severity of the impact to your system, and then reduce the risk by essentially remediating those risks. And then conduct at least a risk assessment after you've done that. And then if you really want to have fun, conduct a tabletop exercise where you test those systems that you've put in place, not just from a technology perspective, but also from a people perspective. We heard from the keynote speaker, people, process, and technology. If you have a good provider that is field experienced in providing tabletop exercises, they will test you. They will test your organization, and they will test your systems. We had a OT company who did a 5-vignette TTX. The day after, they had vignette number 6, and they had a business email compromise. And it was interesting.
TTX is tabletop exercise.
Tabletop exercise. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I don't mean to speak in acronyms, but you know, and you can always interrupt me too. I won't bite, I promise. But it was interesting because the IT director, she was very well poised on that when we had the attorneys and the insurance company on the call. She held her own and was able to explain, based on her experience in that TTX, how to deal with the language of having to explain what happened from a vulnerability perspective, what they had done to remediate it, and then how they were going to move forward. Yes, ma'am, a question. I did not use SOUP, but you're talking about software of unknown provenance, I believe. Yes, that is one of your greatest threats, probably, among others, besides, you know, maladjusted kids that can take a HOIC or a LOIC and fire it off in their parents' basement. Yes. I'm here to, you know, educate and support and collaborate with my fellow panelists. So if there are any questions, I'm not going to share any more about me. Please, if you search my name, use a Brave browser. And I mean that sincerely.
Okay, and from one of our grantees, Ellie?
That's me. Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Mattern. I am the Director of Technology for Community Legal Services. I am located in Orlando. That's my contact information, but please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I know a lot of you are also legal organizations, legal aid organizations, and I'd love to meet other people who are doing this in their own space. So the reason I'm on this panel is because we had 2 clicked phishing emails this year. Nope, last year, because it's 2025 now. And we had one earlier in the year, and I'm going to tell you it did not go well. Because at that time, we had a director of risk and me, the director of technology. The director of risk and our mutual boss were both unavailable. And so there was a lot of who's in charge of what and whose job is to do this and what does this look like. And so we should have probably done tabletop exercises beforehand, but we didn't. So we did it all in real time. And we were able to isolate, you know, change the credentials, and it wasn't a big deal. But if it had been a ransomware attack, it would have been a much bigger deal. And so we use that as an opportunity to say, well, how do we get better from here? And so I am going to direct you all to the app. And if you are interested in looking at it in our app or in the panel app or the session, there's a diagram where it says the IT cyber incident workflow. I'm kind of a visual person. I want to paint by numbers of what we're supposed to do. So I developed a flow chart for what our project or what our response would be for when there was a clicked email, a cyber incident, and also who needed to know. So the biggest question was, do we need to call the CEO immediately? Do we need to call the board chair? Like there was just, even though we had policies, we realized these policies were not tested or they're not real life expectations. And so ultimately we did tell the CEO, ultimately the board chair did find out intentionally, but there wasn't a step or a plan for how that occurred. And so now it's much more clear, okay, starting at the beginning, who's managing it? There's an IT professional whose job it is to take the lead on that. It's either myself or one of the two people who are part of our MSP. There is a representative of the chiefs of CLS, and so that can be the HR director, the chief financial officer, or the CEO. And then from there, it has a flow chart of this is how we're actually going to deal with this incident. And so I impart that to you so you can have it not have as much chaos as I did in our first incident where everybody was like, well, who's in charge and who needs to do what? The other thing that I wanted to bring up is we're all here at ITC to learn from each other. And so I do want to tell you all some of the standards that we have at our organization. So I mentioned previously that we had a bifurcation between risk and technology. I do not recommend that. Please don't do that. We have gotten rid of that this year after many, many conversations because it just breeds confusion as to whose job and role is what. But now that it's all kind of under the IT department is managing all of our day-to-day cyber operations, all of our, I know you don't like that word, but we're dealing with all of our the software deployments, the hardware, as well as protecting our organization and deploying and using KnowBe4 to help train them. However, we also do an external audit of our cyber security audit. That does not come to me. They report directly to my boss so that there's no kind of cross-pollination where I could just be real chummy with the person and be like, but aren't we awesome? So I bought you coffee and you should not tell them we don't do great work. And because of that, then there's an accountability system in terms of who is seeing the report and also can say, like, hey, here are the things that you were supposed to do last year, and which of these are you going to prioritize, and are we going to just assume the risk on some of these because of that, and where have you documented that? Our standard policies are to do KnowBe4 trainings 11 months out of the year, or to do cyber security trainings 11 months out of the year. We do it through KnowBe4, 10 months, and then we do like a policy training around like what our policies are once. And each of those is about 20 minutes per month. Since there seemed to be no kind of global standard around that, I figured I'd let you know what our standards are. Our goals are to do quarterly pen tests and once-a-year security audits. And so those are our standards that we're trying to put in place to try to be hyper in front of incidents and incident response. And then I think I'm going to add tabletop exercises to our list and maybe do those, I don't know, every 6 months?
Depending on how serious you think the threat is to your organization. If you've already had 2 incidents, then you're probably moving in the right direction security-wise. TTX will test that. I would do them every 30 days, but again, from a mil-spec perspective, it's only the country that's at defense, not the organization.
I'll meet you in the middle. We'll do
yeah.
quarterly.
Okay, perfect.
And when you do pen tests quarterly, do you pay someone to do those?
We do. It's part of our external security audit. And we're in the process. We're going to be looking for a new vendor in 2025. But the vendor that we choose to do the security audit once annually also does our pen tests as a part of that arrangement. Thank you, Jada. And that's my intro.
Okay, so my first question is, it's a big deal to plan a roadmap. Where do you start? What do you suggest is the starting point for us?
I'll jump in. Education. Number one, create the atmosphere and conditions for success in that everyone in the room and everyone in your organization is a human firewall. And be aware of what are the threats that are out there, and just keep it simple. Don't try and be a expert. Everyone knows what an expert is, right? It's a drip under pressure. So don't
That's what
be
you-
the...
That's what I said everybody here was.
Right. Yeah, so education and really learning from one's past and try not to repeat it would be my perspective on that, yes.
I think I want to grow on that and say, saying everyone's a human firewall is great, and we definitely say that, but I saw how many hands went up as IT professionals in here. We know who our frequent flyers are. The people who click things in the Fisher emails or the phishing emails, people who always need help with their laptops. Sometimes it helps to be proactive with those people. So somebody who was a multiple clicker on the know before phishing emails, I sat down with him and was like, okay, we're going to talk about some best practices. We're going to look at the phishing emails you clicked and examine where the flags were that those were phishing emails. And then I'm going to tell you some things about hovering over links and these kinds of things. And I got several messages back from him over the next few weeks that were like, thank you for that. I've hovered over all the links. And I was like, I'm thrilled. And so I think spending a little more time with some of the people that may need a little extra help is could be tedious, but I think it's really, really important.
I go one step farther than that. If they continue to click, I go to their managers and say, this person is a risk to our organization, and here's why.
I think going back to it's great to have Jada as a partner because I know that she's going to bring the hammer down. I would say in terms of where to get started, there's lots of cybersecurity frameworks out there. I think the other place that we found a lot of organizations get some leverage is on like your cyber liability insurance application. Like all the things they're asking for, if you're not doing them, like that's a good way to say, hey, like an external vendor or partner says, we need to be considering these different options. And so that's a way to help make the connections to maybe executives who need to approve expenses to say, hey, like our insurance provider says we need to do X, Y, or Z. We're only doing Y,
We have a question in the back.
Just a quick question on your last, if you have a problem employee that you're going to the next level, are there ways to implement shutting down access, or how do you respond to that, like so they can't click on certain things, or was that something for the future for people that might have a known risk?
So from a technology perspective, do you guys have any ideas? I know one of the things I do is if people don't complete their annual training, we turn them off. And then they have to just come to us and we'll turn them on to finish their training. But from a tech perspective, is there a way to sort of watch those people and the links that they have? I think that's more your question.
I'd like to take this question, but also I'm writing down your idea, Jada, because I will be turning people off from now on.
Make sure you get your executive director's
Well,
approval, but yes.
I think that's part of my longer answer is that, so we have a policy in place right now that says if somebody has clicked on a phishing email that was like a fake phishing email from KnowBe4 9 times, they can be fired. I have told people 9 is a really high number. And so one of the things that I'm going to be working on in 2025 is working with senior leadership around really changing our policies to reflect how critical this is for our organization's safety. And so I also let managers know when somebody's behind on trainings. I let managers know when they've had over, 1 click, that's fine. But over a certain threshold of clicks. And I think that there needs to be an adoption at senior leadership levels of how serious this is, and kind of an escalating list of like, no, you're in trouble for this, and you need to really be making better. You need to really put yourself in a position to be better trained, so that this doesn't continue to happen. And so I'd love to talk to you more about that because it's a project I'm going to be working on this year.
I'd like to add a couple of things. Don't be punitive. I'm serious. Be a leader. Set the expectations of what kind of behavior you want, and work with the organization. And then certainly, if you have an individual that doesn't get it, work with them. But if you're sending out emails that say you're going to lose your job if you click this one more time, I've heard the term silent quitting before. You may have somebody that starts to get angry, and perhaps they start to do things that are more malicious than just clicking a link. So it gets back to that point about education.
Jade, we had a question. What is a pen test?
Oh, so pen test stands for penetration test. It's, you usually get people from the outside to come in and scan and do other things to look at all the vulnerabilities or things you might have wrong. And I think it's better, I've started calling it at work just security testing, because, I don't know, penetration testing didn't really, it sounded funny to my leadership.
I would ask you to not use the term penetration testing, because all it is you've got somebody that has a tool, an automated tool that they've probably purchased over the web. They've been anointed to press the button and see the output, and then they don't understand what the results of it are, and they give it to the client and say, here, you figure it out. Spreadsheets that even look at the browser versions, I mean, what kind of ridiculous horse hockey is that? It should be what's called a system compromise exercise. That's not a selling point. But when I mention in terms of the infrastructure that you should have tested, it's your domain name services and your web-enabled technologies. Because that, as a hacker, is how I will get into your organization. I'll look for those softwares that are vulnerable and unpatched, and that's my way in. And you should find somebody that knows how to do this, that can do it ethically. Not somebody that has got a pen testing cert. I hate certs, by the way. I do. Thank you. It just means you can take a test really well. Well, whoop-de-doo. They should have field experience in order to conduct that system compromise exercise.
Yeah, I would, just to piggyback a little bit on that, just because that term pen test, I think, reflects a little bit of an outdated view of what our IT infrastructure looks like now. I mean, pen tests are helpful, again, if you have a firewall, if you have servers, if you've got everybody in the office and you've got a big network to attack. But if your organization is working remotely, or you're all in Office 365 or Google Workspace, like, you cannot pen test, nobody's gonna pen test Google. And so having a conversation or talking to different vendors about what does it mean to, what was the term you used, like risk, the cyber external assessment?
Oh, the system compromise
Yeah, the
exercise.
system
Yes,
compromise.
yes.
So what,
SCE.
yeah, so what are the systems that you're using? And then it might be doing a configuration review to make sure that you've checked all the boxes correctly in those systems, as opposed to a adversarial pen test. So you've got a lot more value out of that. So sorry, I know we're.
Well, sorry, but one of the additional thoughts that you should be thinking about is supply chain vulnerabilities that are being introduced by your providers. So if you're with, say, a cloud services provider, I'm not going to name names, but I'll include the names in my explanation. They probably are using systems, hardware, software, and firmware that is outdated. And when I run a test on your systems, I'm going to see those vulnerabilities. And they're bringing the risk back to your organization every single time.
Oh, sorry, this question was for you. So you had said that your policy had said 9 times if the person had clicked on it. Are you thinking of a number now, or are you trying to shop it to the, like, do you have a?
My number's probably much lower than senior leadership is prepared to accept. But I think that 5 is kind of the absolute maximum that I would think is allowable within a certain period of time, because I think the policy even says 9 times in a year. Well, if we previously did 12 tests in a year, that's like a way majority of the tests. So 4 or 5 is the number that I want to talk to senior leadership about, with the first click kind of being like a, hey, you get some extra training. Second click is, hey, you get some extra training, and your manager has to have a conversation with you. Third click, you're going to have conversations with me, HR, and, you know, some other people for educational purposes. And going from there. So those are the numbers I'm thinking about, but since I have not shopped that to senior leadership, but they're not here, so unless they're watching us on YouTube, I'll just tell them ahead of time.
A question over here first, I think.
Wasn't really a question. I just wanted to amen the focus on pen testing that I see out in the field right now and in this community generally. And pen testing is like one puzzle piece out of 360 puzzle pieces in the circle. It's not a bad or evil thing, but it's not the thing. So I just wanted to amen that.
Absolutely right.
And we had another question in the chat, which was, do you have any examples of or templates for tabletop exercises?
So the question around templates for tabletop exercises, I would just say if you have outside legal counsel for your organization, they can be a good resource to help structure things and have conversations with senior leadership. I think the other resource that's helpful for the IT folks in the room is Black Hills Information Security has like a, backdoors and breaches, like a card deck. And it's really fantastic because it can help you as an IT team kind of create some different scenarios to work through. There is a separate, and I can, if there's a way to put resources back in the app, there's a separate add-on for NGOs, which I think there's some overlap in terms of some of the scenarios that they build in that's on GitHub that can be a good resource if you're going to, just explore and kind of play around with those tabletop exercises internally. So external legal counsel, backdoors and breaches are good tools.
I'm going to add to that. Also, find a provider that has field experience doing this. Downloading a template, getting a deck of cards is no way to do it. Find somebody that can test your system by reviewing it from an external perspective as an attacker. If you try and test your own system, it's like pen testing or providing a system exercise on yourself. It's not going to work because of the politics, the communication, the lack of participation. It has to be something that's done off-site by somebody that knows what they're doing. The federal government, in fact, CISA has templates for this. So if you want to look at the way that the feds are doing it, you could certainly do that, but I would advise against that unless you are really insane at some point. Yes.
Bill, while you're there, can you introduce CISA and explain
Yes,
to
I am
everybody?
so sorry. It's one of those acronyms. Computer Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. Yes. So, and I'm going to go and give you another one, ICS CERT, Industrial Control System Computer Emergency Response Team. Say that 10 times fast. Those are the ladies and gentlemen in Idaho that when they get a call from a manufacturer of hardware or software or firmware and they've got a vulnerability that has been identified by a hacker, they will work with that manufacturer to score the risk of that vulnerability being detonated against your infrastructure on a scale of 0 to 10. We have had clients who have had those that are in the 10 range of critical that have to be remediated at the day that we give them to them. And I'm talking about this particular industry.
And can you tell everybody a little bit more about CISA and what they might want to pay attention to?
Oh,
with
yes,
CISA?
absolutely. So, yeah. So CISA is really the government's cyber defense mechanism. The challenge is they're a governmental organization that is not going to protect you, nor will the military. That is your responsibility to secure your infrastructure as it relates to national critical infrastructure. And if you can't figure it out, they will figure it out for you through regulation, laws, or fines punitively. So you have to be aware of what they can and can't do. There's actually a binding operational directive 25. You may want to look at that because that gives fantastic guidance to your question about how to secure yourself. It's a roadmap of what to do with off-premise cloud like we were just talking about in a variety of different environments, Microsoft, Azure, so on and so forth. The extent of your tax dollars at work that is in that portal is unbelievable.
They also are, if you haven't synced up with CISA, and they're a great way to see what vulnerabilities are coming out.
Yes, they come out every Tuesday and Thursday at 9:15 Mountain Time. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 9:15. You can subscribe to the list free. Again, your tax dollars at work, and I'm not advocating for them, nor am I a federal government representative, but they have good stuff. They do, yes.
Okay, who's next? Bob? Okay.
Can you comment on personal use?
The question was, can you comment on personal use? Who wants to take that one? It's like
I would rather not.
hot tamale.
Yeah, it is a hot tamale. And so this is a conversation that CLS is having. So here are some of the things we're doing. One of the things that we're doing through the IT department is we're making all of the apps that people can use on their devices managed apps. And so if we're rolling that out in 2025, we're testing it right now with some of the senior leadership. And what it is that if you have Outlook or Teams or Gmail or whatever, I assume Google has the same thing, I can lock someone out of an app that's on their phone because it's managed by IT. And so the problem is that if you just let them add Outlook from like normal, you can't do that. The good thing about that is that it does give IT the ability to do an immediate lockout. The bad thing about that is it does prevent them from doing certain things so they're going to call and be annoyed by you. So last night I had somebody that I'm here with who's from my organization whose cell phone I didn't know. And so I tried to copy and paste it from our Teams chat and it would not let me. It's like, your organization will not let you copy and paste out of the organization. So I was like, okay, let me grab a pen and write her number down and then go to my phone and enter it. And so I think managed apps is a really effective way to start to harden people's BYOD devices. It's not a perfect solution. There aren't a lot of those, but that's certainly one thing that we're going to be doing.
So one of the observations I have is people use their work laptop for personal photos, watching YouTube. Anyone else? Spotify?
So we do a lot of training around what people are and are not supposed to do on their work laptops. That obviously doesn't stop them from doing certain things. But we also try to limit what they can download from the internet. So if they're in a browser, I'm less concerned about them using Spotify. But if they're downloading apps to the computer, we don't allow them to do that. We harden that, so that's harder. That has kind of been where I've drawn my line in the sand, is if you want to use a browser to watch YouTube, okay. Please don't on work time. But also, if you want to download a video player, no, hard pass. You can't do that.
Who's next? Okay.
Hi, I'm Lara Atsuka. I'm from Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services, and TBD is our managed service provider, but I swear I'm not a plant of Bill's. But since we had been talking about the TTX, I just wanted to share that we had gone through that exercise earlier this year, and we used it to test our internal firm continuity plan. But I think I would also recommend it because it basically, whoever's on your disaster response team, and for us, it's senior leadership, it's our regional leaders, our IT team, you're all together in a room. So not only does it help you test that plan, it also just helps you see how you all work together and how you react to situations. And it's really a worthwhile exercise. And just wanted to offer too that if anyone's interested from the legal aids perspective about how the TTXs work, please feel free to reach out to me.
How did you talk your management into taking the time and the resources to do that?
That's a good question. It actually took us about 6 months to get it on the calendar because it was a full half-day exercise, and we had people, we wanted to do it in person, and we had people from all over the southern part of the states. Some had to drive, several hours to get there, but having TBD advocate for it, I had to talk to senior leadership about the importance of it, and they offered to do it for us for free, which also didn't hurt. But really, the hard part is convincing everyone to give the time to it, and I think it goes back to what, Ellie, you were saying earlier about needing to communicate just how vital this is to your operations and to continuing to be able to serve clients.
And going back to something Matt said, our cybersecurity insurance folks often ask us lots of questions. And one of the questions is always, do you have an incident response plan? Have you updated your incident response plan? And I would say that if you're doing a tabletop exercise, you're even going further than updating your incident response plan. And I would definitely tell your insurance providers that, because they might see you as less of a risk.
I would add to that, if I could jump in for a quick
Yeah,
second,
absolutely.
is also if your technology provider is credentialed to provide you with a letter of attestation that you have done these things and they have met standards that they use to test your organization, not just something that you pulled off of ChatGPT, but a real, well, you laugh, but it may be true, but nonetheless, an insurance company, they're, as you say, they're going to ask, what have you done and who tested you and who's going to verify that you actually did it. It's like taking a physical fitness test. You don't score yourself, much like the pen test. You have somebody adjudicate and monitor that and tell you when you're doing things wrong. And if an insurance company has that letter of attestation, it makes the whole process much easier. And in a real world, you wouldn't need insurance. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Hensley. I work for LexisNexis, but I'm here in a personal capacity. And I'm here because this is of high interest to me because I feel that everyone should really be aware of cybersecurity. But I apologize in advance if my questions are very, very low level and beneath what everybody else is at. But Bill, you indicated that we should find providers that are not CISA. And also, we need a roadmap for off-premises use with the cloud. Can you please define that a little more and give more meat to that statement?
Sure, absolutely. Finding, CISA is a great resource, and you don't need to be an expert in order to use the resources. But if you have a technology partner that has used them in the real world and real world experiences, not just domestically, but internationally, they'll give you the leg up in terms of understanding what that threat surface is. So you need somebody that's field experience. That's not an advocacy statement for veterans, but it really is, because they have been tested in violent situations of which your organization is ill-prepared to face. And so in terms of finding a resource, a technology provider that has been there and done that is certainly the first case for that. But also panels like this where we're collaborating and learning from each other. Nobody has all of the answers, but I think as a group we can learn from each other and become much stronger.
Did you have one other piece of that other than CISA? I'm sorry.
Yes, the roadmap for the off-premises with the cloud.
Yes, that's under Binding Operational Directive 25 from CISA. So if you Google BOD 25, I wrote an article on it, so you might find that too, but it gives you such extensive resources, and it's not, and I say this respectfully, the questions you're asking are not certainly beneath the level of the audience. They're actually good questions, because what it is, it's really just common sense from a technology practitioner perspective, applying a layer of securing that so that you don't have these threats coming in. And the federal government has put this BOD 25 out there to secure federal entities, because they're more and very concerned about critical infrastructure being continually penetrated by hackers from one of the, nation states. Not that the state Treasury Department has got their own problems, but this gives at least your organization an understanding of who could or would want to come after you and how you can secure that, which gets back to what I said before, is understanding who would want to attack you. If in the legal field, it's interesting, because if you're dealing with intellectual property and you've got a very high value case, or really any caseload that's out there and is being promoted, and I'm an adversary and I want to know about it, I'm going to come and I'm going to find an easy way into your organization, whether it's on or off premise, take that information and use it against you with the legal team that you're facing. It's trivial to do. Very trivial.
And I think it's really important for us to all think, why would people attack us? Like, what are they after? In our case at LSC, I think there are two main things. They're after money. We have pretty big deposits that go to all of our grantees, and they're after our reputation. So, if they could get in and attack our website and make us look like fools, and I think this is the way you should think. And I'm certainly not an expert on this, but what would the bad guys want?
I'm sure most people here agree that educating staff is one of the most important tools we have against possible attacks. But have any of you started or have any processes for staff using GPTs for work?
Good one.
So I do. I made a spreadsheet for people, and I sent it out to the litigation department specifically, but also have shared it with the rest of the organization. I said I don't have a problem with people using even free versions of the AI services that are available for non-client confidential information. So if the communications department wants help writing a letter or whatever, knock yourself out. But I've told them, do not put names in it, names of people, places. If it is a proper noun, it does not go in ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or any of them. And so what I did in my spreadsheet is I gave use cases of why someone may want to use it, and then also platforms. So like Westlaw is the system that we use at our organization. Westlaw has some AI-powered information. I said, if it's part of Westlaw, fine. But if it's something you are doing outside of an existing system, that we already have investigated and invested time in their platform, then the answer is no.
Yeah, I would also just say it's great that you've got that. There are lots of AI policy adoption templates out there. You know, on our website, we have an AI policy adoption framework. Also, TAG, Technology Association of Grantmakers, has a good policy adoption framework. So I think, again, coming back to earlier comments, like starting with policy so that you can all be on the same page in terms of what we're doing and how is a great way to build that conversation. And then, yeah, so as an organization, you can say, here's the scenarios where it works, here's where it's not. People are going to use it. It's right. So I mentioned we support about 8,000 nonprofits. We do some DNS security filtering. And I would say about 80% of the endpoints are going to you know, AI tools, you know, in the absence of policy, right? So people are doing it whether you you have blessed it or not. And so I think it's really at this point, you know, build some policy, have some guidance, you know, use this, not that. You know, what we're seeing is most organizations are, you know, taking advantage of AI tools that are already built into the products that they have, as opposed to like going out and like building some new stuff. But again, there's a lot of work ahead, but being clear from a policy perspective, and then putting some training and education resources around what's appropriate, what's not, and how are we going to adopt this as an organization is really a way to go.
Carl?
Can you speak to the importance of having an up-to-date software procurement policy that stipulates, for example, you won't purchase from vendors that can't supply you a SOC 2 report?
Yes. SOC 2, Type 2 is what they're talking about. It's a checklist-driven risk analysis form that if you look at it, it's like an eye chart. And if you've not done one before, you can become very well nauseated by it. And I mean that sincerely and genuinely. I think if you have a software provider that cannot provide you with a risk assessment of what they have undertaken to provide you with the software they're providing, then perhaps look at alternatives. What that means is anything that is being introduced into your environment, you should be conducting a risk assessment on them. So not just software and checklists that verify that, but doing it proactively before you introduce that risk into your environment.
Bill, can you talk
I'm
a little
gonna-
bit? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that, okay. Not all of the software that everyone in this room and everyone in your organizations wants to use is going to have SOC 2. Because there are some softwares in our industry that just don't have it or don't have it yet. And so my comment to you is, in the absence of having that, if your organization is determined to use that platform, document the choice that the organization has made, that senior leadership was aware that it didn't have a SOC 2, and that is something that the organization has decided, which is fine. Organizations are allowed to assume risk on certain organizational decisions. And so my comment to that is, when SOC 2 is not an option, make sure you're documenting that decision.
And if I could, carrying off on that, so that would be step 3 that I mentioned, is create that risk register. I know, Jada, you mentioned that last night when we had our pre-session, that you have one, and I applaud
Yes.
that. I mean, having a risk register, and this would be one of those that you register in there in terms of the decision makers that said yes or no, so that you can look at alternatives, because but when something happens, you'll at least have an idea of how to go back and remediate it. Not hold anybody accountable, of course, we'd never want to do that, but at least look at alternatives that you considered and perhaps implement those. Yes.
And a risk register doesn't have to be difficult.
Nope.
It can be a spreadsheet. We review ours every couple months, and we just write down the vulnerabilities that we know we have, you know, to the level of so-and-so has admin access to their laptop, and this is why, and we've accepted this risk because, and we have a memo that states that here. Or we have an old server that we don't know why anybody would have an on-premise server at this point, but we have an on-prem server that we can't get rid of until we move, and I tell them we're turning it off, and this is why. And we review that, and if one of the risks kind of goes to a higher level, I send it to our risk, our person that manages risk within LSC to say, Just wanted to tell you, we have this IT risk that rises to this level. I think you should know about it. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, apologies to backtrack on the personal use question, but can you speak to any personal use email policies or audits that happen within your orgs?
We allow people specifically, and I'm not sure how bad this is, a certain amount of personal use, as long as they're not, supporting causes that are detrimental to LSC or doing work outside of LSC, and not from a security perspective, but just from you can send your husband that email from your person or your LSC account. Okay, guys, tell me how bad that is.
Yeah, no, I think we have an imaginary threshold where it's like 10% of your work time, or 10% of your time on your computer devices can be, which 10% sounds high, but I feel like that we have an imaginary threshold by, if you want to book a reservation at a restaurant for the night, or send your spouse an email, like, it's probably not the end of the world. Yeah.
One of the worlds that I come from is separation of church and state. So you have a network that is not connected to the rest of things, that's your work network, and you don't have any personal use that's allowed. Is it going to get violated? It absolutely does. Happens every day. Then you have the open network that you use for personal information or doing Google searches or whatever it is that you want to bring back on that machine, so that when it is compromised, it doesn't affect the institution. And we talked about this earlier. Everyone, and I mentioned it somewhat facetiously, but on either one of those, you should have the policies that you've heard from this lady and this gentleman in terms of what is acceptable use. So have an acceptable use policy for both of those, so they don't understand that they do understand that if there is eventually a commingling, what can happen when that does happen. Everyone has a Google account, right? And they use it on their work laptop, right? Right?
They do.
No, why not?
So from a legal service organization perspective, how would you implement that, idea of church and state, where you have the network that touches network, nothing else? What would that be?
So I am a huge believer in the separation of church and state in all effects. And so never the twain shall cross in terms of my laptop. The problem that I have seen with that is that the adoption rate of that kind of mentality definitely seems to be varied. And so while we do, as a drumbeat, tell people you should not be using your work computer for outside activities, we do have an acceptable use policy that does have that imaginary number in there, because we certainly aren't tracking for that imaginary number. But we do try to continue to train and talk to people about, ideally you would just pick up your phone to send that email.
I know you got something really scintillating to say, but one thing we were talking about before is if you allow the use of collapsible virtual machines on your corporate network, and you train your staff to use that only for personal use, that's one way of avoiding that. So when they're done with that session, not only is it more time consuming and technically laborious to spin up that session to access Gmail, but it also collapses it so that there is no breadcrumbs, if you will, or any sort of detritus from a digital perspective that's coming back into your environment. Is it hard to do? No, not at all. It's something you should make as part of your cybersecurity roadmap, actually. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
There's a gentleman in the back that has had his hand up for quite a while.
Also, we were talking a lot about pen testing, or as Bill pointed out, it's called security compromise assessments, as well as risk assessments. There are a lot of out-of-the-box tools that are out there that people are purchasing. How granular should your assessments be?
I'll take that one. I love this. Oh, this is so cool. So if I have your domain name, as some of you in the room know, I can find so much out about your organization, not maliciously. I need your permission written before I do this, but I can take your domain, and imagine I'm a hacker and I'm doing this. I can, with certain tools that you can download, and we use a majority of open source, quite frankly, but with experience and, of course, without force majeure, I'm going to use some legal terms that are probably not appropriate, but it doesn't necessarily matter. I can find out so much information about you, your users, and your organization, servers that are open, systems that you're using. Okay. No, they should be doing, not to interrupt you, ma'am, they should be doing a black box test. They should have no user credentials to your network. All they need is a domain name. If you get an agency, and I use that term loosely, that says they can do it and they only can do it on-prem, fire them immediately, because they're doing you a disservice and they're charging you unnecessary money. You need somebody that can do it from the outside anywhere in the world, because that's where the adversary is coming from. Trust me on this. Yes. Hopefully that answered the question. I didn't mean to interrupt you, ma'am. I'm so sorry.
Hi, thinking about the risk register, that kind of scares me because now you're putting all your vulnerabilities in a spreadsheet that's easy for somebody to compromise and now go, oh, hey, here's all the things that we can target. It's things like that that, you know, it's how do you keep track of that stuff but not create honeypots? You know, we have millions of documents with client information, and how do you wall them off so that when you do get a compromise, the friends and family mentality that a lot of people use where everybody has access to everything, you don't create just one giant, you know, place to.
So I put ours in a secure environment, and one of the things that I do whenever we have security testing done, and the test comes, usually if it's a reputable company, they have you go somewhere and pull the report. They're not emailing it. And then when my auditors ask me for the report, I say not only no, but hell no. I'm not sending it or, you know, transmitting it to you unless I take a lot of time to redact a whole bunch of stuff where it's not useful to you anymore. So we're pretty careful. I don't know what else.
Yes, I mean, there's a simple rule. If you have to ask, you really don't have a need to know. I mean that seriously. You should be read in on that. And you shouldn't be, I mean, much to what Jada's credit and she's talking about, shouldn't be sharing spreadsheets that have that type of information only with those that really need to know. And it should be password protected in an environment that is segregated and separated from the rest of the network. So you're advising leadership on what the risks are. Everyone else is probably introducing the risks, and you want to educate them so that they don't know what those are, to your point, sir, but also so that you can avoid adding to that risk register and going back and remediating those.
And I wouldn't like be sending the spreadsheet to leadership. I would be telling them one or two things and no specifics.
He's right.
I mean,
He's right. I mean, you're right.
I mean, the point that I would say is that I think you have to look like what's the likelihood that that's going to happen versus like the trade-off, right? I mean, if you have somebody that's already hacked into your laptop, like you've got bigger problems than them finding, you know, a list of other vulnerabilities. And so I think, you know, understanding it's not only the risk, but what's the risk of something happening versus the likelihood of that happening as well, so that you can kind of focus on the things that are, you know, really going to cause problems. And so if you have a list of, you know, the risks that your organization faces, and that's in a you know, secure location, it has a password on it, like that's probably sufficient because you've got other things to focus on in terms of more likely scenarios.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Earlier, we were talking about SOC reports, and that's really, I see it as all part of vendor due diligence, and is really the greatest risk because that's where bad actors are really going. There was in the news all the time where last week it was school grade books were hacked, and 1,000 high schools all across the nation, the students' records have been exposed. So if you really like a vendor and you're going to store PII with them, it's 3 questions to ask. Do you have a SOC report? If not, why not, and when will you? And what are you using as a basis of your security program now? And really think about, do you want to do business with them, because they should have it. It's like a bank not having FDIC insurance today.
Can I add to that too? So we not only, for our providers, we ask for their SOC 2 reports before we sign the contract with them. We also have someone review them. So these, Bill said it, I mean, if you've ever done one, you've probably knocked your head off the wall a couple times, but reading them is no fun either. And so, but I have someone that reads them, reviews them, and writes a memo that he has reviewed them, and that is the papering that helps us with auditors, that we not only have them, we're looking at what their vulnerabilities are.
I would add to that too. I mean, if you have security experienced individuals on your team and you're interfacing with the security individuals on a vendor or a client, typically you're going to cut to the chase rather quickly rather than going to this indefensible checklist that really nobody knows what the end state is until you get to the end of it, and it doesn't necessarily apply anyway because you've probably already been breached. But having a discussion that's mature, collaborative, and understanding what both organizations or both parties need in order to be secure, I think that's the largest measure of success. We had a client who, not in the legal services, but they had a third-party payer. And when we did a compromise exercise of the system, the payer, and they're handling, hundreds of thousands of dollars, their hardware that they were using to provide the service to our customer was vulnerable on several levels. And when we got on the phone with the security team, of course, you've got these 5 lads, and they're all serious and very defensible. And I'm the only one on the call. And I said, gentlemen, we need to work through this. It's not a stump the chump or point the finger, but let's work together so that our mutual client is not being ravaged by third-party cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And then they told me they had pen tested themselves, and I said, really? So you guys are all in cyber. I want you to go home tonight and fire yourself after you look yourself in the mirror.
Okay, so we only have a few minutes left. I want to ask the panel, do you have any parting words?
I do, and it's on a completely unrelated note, but I just learned it, and it's very cool. So a lot of malware, there's malware that's starting to come out for people's phones, but a lot of malware is not very sticky if you actually reset your phone and turn it off and turn it back on again. And so I've started implementing on Mondays, I turn my phone off and turn it back on again, just in the event that I have some kind of breach.
It's a random tech tip.
I would say know who your adversaries are and ensure that your organization at least starts with something after this discussion from a very simplistic, repeatable process that everybody can understand. You've all heard of the KISS principle? Implement that. You have not? Yes. Okay.
We haven't actually talked about it, but the one thing I would say is that we've talked a lot about technology, but I think process is really important, particularly as it relates to your finance department. Following up on account compromise, what we see is wire fraud is where all these threat actors are going, right? This is cyber crime, and they're looking to get paid. So technology is important, but also having good process. So making sure your finance has good processes in place for making changes to wire or other bank transfer payments, I think is really important to do.
If you want to continue on a security track, next session, there's Justice Secured next door at Deer Valley. And I think I might get punishment from LSC if I don't say, please provide session feedback. And it is up on the screen, and it's in your app. Please give us a survey. Thank you.
Thank you.